The Lover's Pentacle, Chapter 16. The Fool. Do you want to go to the movie theater? Asked Kain, saying the first thing that came to his mind. Movie theaters are not really my thing, said Eugenia. I have my own home theater, and you can come to my house and we can watch a flick. On the drive back to Eugenia's house, Kain would sneeze from time to time, and Eugenia had suggested that they shower to avoid catching a cold. Eugenia also wanted an excuse to ogle the merchandise. Kain undressed and he got inside the standing shower. Instead of curtains, the shower had clear glass sheet that kept the water out. Eugenia stood there while she examined Kain's new body, and when he turned around, she saw the type of package he was carrying. And it wasn't the biggest she had ever seen, but it was certainly very pretty to look at. Kain saw Eugenia staring at him, so he began to pass the soap over his body in a slow, seductive manner. The show had always worked on Karina, and it had a similar effect on Eugenia. Kain figured that he might as well sleep with Eugenia since he was in a good mood for a change. He imagined that the reason why Eugenia had become distant was because he had yet to sleep with her. Even in the heat of passion, Kain remembered to reach into his wallet to get some protection. After building up Eugenia's expectations, she was disappointed to discover that lovemaking with Kain wasn't Kain's strong point. After an hour, Eugenia got bored of the exercising futility, and she did her best mimicry of a woman who was satisfied before leaving the shower. And she pressed a button and a movie screen lowered itself, and she made a quick stop to the living room to fetch a Blu-ray. Her sister Dorothy regularly rented Blu-rays and DVDs. After looking at the new films over the top, Eugenia decided to watch How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Kain left the bathroom wrapped in a towel, and he was completely oblivious to the fact that he had not matched Eugenia's ridiculously high expectations. Eugenia's first instinct was to critique Kain's technique, or lack thereof. But when she saw his childish smile, she chose not to. Kain lay down beside Eugenia, and he drew her closer to have her rest her lovely head on top of his chest. And with his free hand, he started to absentmindedly pet Eugenia's hair. The two began to watch a romantic comedy while they snuggled, and Eugenia had to admit that her new boyfriend was good in the snuggling department, and his conversation was pleasant. And at the end of the movie, the two went for another round with similar results. Kain was the first to fall asleep, and Eugenia looked at her boyfriend while she meditated in all of her life choices. It was a pity that such a beautiful man didn't know how to make use of his assets. And while Eugenia was extremely unsatisfied in another part of Miami, there was Bruno rocking Karina's world. And as a man with high ambitions, he wanted to be the best at everything he ever attempted. And before choosing Karina, Bruno had plowed through hundreds of maidens in his search for his perfect first lady, and who would immediately break up with any woman that he perceived was just there to fool around. And Karina was the first maiden he had ever run into that wanted to have a serious relationship, and her little jealousy outbursts were a minor defect, but it was a problem that flattered his ego. At the end of the first play session, Karina received a photo from Eugenia, and Karina giggling showed the photo to Bruno, and the photograph was a selfie of Kain and Eugenia in bed together. So they finally did it. Good for them, said Bruno. I hope he used protection, said Karina, worried. Eugenia is a confirmed party animal, and who knows what sort of cooties she carries. You can be experienced and disease-free. It is all a matter of being careful and paying attention to the signs, said Bruno. And as soon as I hear a maiden complaining while she pees, that is my cue to scram. So tell me, Bruno, said Karina, you certainly know how to gyrate. How many others came before me? I can give you an estimate, said Bruno after kissing Karina on the nose. Karina gave Bruno a playful slap, and then she said, well, I can't judge either. I am also far more experienced than I care to admit. Have you ever slept with a woman? Asked Bruno, teasing Karina. No, do you want me to? Asked Karina. Yes, it would amuse me, lied Bruno, teasing Karina. Who do you have in mind? Asked Karina. Eugenia is a good option. I feel that you two had great chemistry together, like Bruno. And what would you have me do to Eugenia? Asked Karina, narrowing her eyes. And Bruno, falling for the trap, went on a rant about all of the perverted things he would like Karina to do to Eugenia, and at the end of his tirade, Karina screeched, "If you like Eugenia so much, why are we even dating?" "It was a joke," said Bruno, laughing nervously. And if you felt uncomfortable about the topic, you could have politely asked to talk about literally anything else. "I'm not stupid, Bruno. You like Eugenia, admit it," screeched Karina. "Calm down, Karina. You are going to wake up your mother," said Bruno. "You are not talking yourself out of this mess, mister," hissed Karina, jumping out of bed, and she began to pace the bedroom in mimicry of Bruno during his court proceeding. "Oh, how could I have been so blind? Why didn't I see the signs and all the time I wasted on you?" Bruno left the bed and he started getting dressed. The pause created by his sudden sprint out of bed allowed him to mentally write up a rebuttal. "Karina, you are right. There are things that I like about Eugenia," said Bruno coldly. "Eugenia doesn't write letters to distant family members to force painful reunion. She doesn't hex her lovers whenever they act in contrary to her wishes, and she doesn't throw tantrums whenever she imagines that her boyfriend is cheating on her. I love you, Karina, but I can't stand living like this anymore. I'm sorry I'm not perfect, but neither are you, woman. And I can't spend every waking moment watching what I say you do. If you do not change, you are going to spend the rest of your life miserable and alone." Bruno left the house and he drove back to his apartment and he sat down on his couch to face his chessboard. This retreat was a dangerous move, but he was close to checkmate, and he fell asleep while facing the chessboard. And as soon as Bruno left her house, Karina threw herself on top of the bed to kick and scream up a storm. Her mother, who had heard everything, entered her daughter's room in order to do damage control. Only wanted her daughter to reconcile with her boyfriend instead of crawling back to Kain. Karina barely slept after her first big argument with Bruno, and when she drove to her day job, she fell asleep while driving. She realized she was asleep because she saw her father's emaciated ghost in her passenger seat. The presence woke her up before she smashed against a tree. Karina decided to err on the side of caution, and she packed her car and she went down her contact list to see who could give her a ride. Bruno happened to be driving by when he saw Karina looking visibly distressed. Like this book came before Uber was a thing, because this is like the early 2000s, so Uber did not exist. Bruno entered the parking lot and he left his car to see what was wrong with his girlfriend. "Are you stalking me now?" asked Karina with a hostile tone in her voice. "I was driving to work when I noticed you had car problems," explained Bruno. "We may not be getting along for the moment, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to turn a blind eye when you are in need of aid, Karina." "I don't need your help," protested Karina. "Stop being a brat," yelled Unla over the phone. Karina looked at the time, and since she was late for work, she reluctantly accepted Bruno's help. Bruno drove slowly through the Miami traffic, and Karina rested her head against her fist, and she began to doze off again. Bruno too yawned in spite of himself, and when Karina snapped out of her power nap, she was right at work. She walked out of her car with a weary step, and as soon as she entered the front door, the manager began to give her an earful. Bruno, seeing Karina getting yelled at, went inside to bully the bully, and after the shouting match, the manager yielded to Bruno's reasoning, and there were going to be days that, regardless of how early you awoke, the Miami traffic was going to conspire to make you late for work. And to further reinforce this idea, the owner of the establishment arrived a few minutes after Karina. The boss happened to have played football with Bruno, and with the power dynamic shifting, the manager decided to leave Karina alone for the time being. Karina were half asleep without much enthusiasm, and her manager had yelled at her for being a few minutes late. After work, Karina was picked up by her mother, and she showered and she went to sleep, and she slept for 4 hours straight, and she awoke around 9 p.m., and she thought of Kain, and her old habits compelled her to visit her best friend. She knocked on his door, and the one to answer was Jack. "I know why you're here, Karina," said Jack, narrowing his eyes, "and I'm not going to allow you to misuse my son." Your son. You two wouldn't have reconciled if it wasn't for my intervention," protested Karina, stomping the floor in anger. "And you have my eternal gratitude, Karina. Now scram! Shoo!" said Jack. "It's fine, Dad," said Kain, coming to the door. "Let her come inside." Jack stepped aside to allow Karina to enter within, and the same ritual played out as before. Karina cried and vented about Bruno for hours, and Kain hugged his friend and he offered her a sympathetic ear. When Karina kissed Kain, her friend did not return the kiss, and this time things played out differently. Karina attempted to make love to her best friend, and Kain moved away from her, and he said nervously, I am still with Eugenia, and she hasn't broken up with me yet, so in good conscience I cannot be with you, Karina. I was here first, protested Karina, and you left me for Bruno. You always leave me, said Kain with a trembling in his voice. And frankly, I am tired. Aren't you tired too, Karina? So that's how you want to play it. All right, Kain. It was nice knowing you, said Karina, picking up her purse to leave in a huff. Karina had expected for Kain to try to detain her, but her power move failed, and she slammed the door and she began to fumble with her keys. Before she moved away from the door, she heard Kain's voice say, You're not the only one who's suffering, Karina, and while you were busy being angry at Bruno, do you know what that man did? He came to me and he begged me not to sleep with you. Karina, never mind, just do whatever you want. It's not as if you're about to listen to what anyone else has to say. As soon as Karina drove away, Jack said to his son, I am proud of you, son. You don't need that alley cat. You can do better. You can do so much better. I hope that Karina works things out with Bruno, said Kain, lying down in the couch to soak. The guy really likes her, and of all of Karina's boyfriends, he's the first one to beg me for help. Karina began to drive around Miami with no clear direction or purpose, and she was still angry at Bruno, and she wanted to cheat on him. And with Kain finally growing a spine, she was forced to go on the prowl. She drove to Blue Martini, a bar with a lakeside view of Kendall, and she roosted by the bar for a few hours till she caught a fish. And her catch of the night was a brutish, extremely inebriated man. The two went to the bathroom, and after the man burped his cigarette breath into her face, Karina decided felt like going home. The man, who was still in the heat of passion, didn't allow for Karina to leave, and when Karina started struggling, the man, infuriated, punched her in the face. Karina screamed like a wounded animal, and her scream attracted the attention of Bruno, who had indeed been stalking Karina for hours. And he jumped into the bathroom to save her, and he punched the man who had attacked Karina with much fury. And Bruno even went as far as smashing the guy with a tank lid. You know, like that thing that's on top of like the toilet, that heavy porcelain stuff. Like, Bruno drove Karina home, and Karina was meek and silent. Bruno, after thinking of a good line, broke the silence. I think you need to go to anger management classes. You go from 0 to 100 very easily, and over the stupidest of reasons. Not only are you hurting yourself, but you are making miserable those around you. I'm sorry, Bruno. I don't know what got over me, said Karina. I'm the one who needs to apologize, said Bruno, speaking truthfully. I should have intervened sooner, but I wanted to see how far your fury was going to take you. Karina sighed and said, If you don't want to be my boyfriend anymore, I won't hold it against you. It is our first bump in the road, and it is way too early to call it quits, don't you think? Reasoned Bruno. You really want to put up with me? Asked Karina, smiling sadly, after you caught me cheating on you. All I saw was a drunkard forcing himself on my girl. I will have to be a pretty mean-spirited individual to consider that an infidelity, said Bruno, taking Karina's hand to kiss it. I changed my mind at the very end. That is why I screamed, said Karina. I am sorry I'm no longer first lady material. Nah, you are good enough, thought Bruno. Instead, he said, There's no such thing as a perfect first lady, and as long as you're not a drug addict or a drunkard, I am quite happy to put up with your little abuses, Karina. Wow, you really set the bar low for me, didn't you? Said Karina, laughing nervously. I am inflexible with regards to unhealthy vices, said Bruno. Everything else is negotiable. The two arrived to Unla's house, and the moment that Unla saw her daughter returning home with a swollen cheek, the woman pitched a fit. And when Unla was calmer, Karina explained to her mother how she had gotten punched in the face by a drunk guy she had picked up. And Bruno spent the night licking Karina's wounds, and close to midnight Karina managed to consolidate sleep. And she dreamed of her father, Juan Carlos, again, and he was looking more skeletal than ever. And her father was in his blue scrubs, and he was rocking a cradle at an unnatural pace. Karina came to stand before her father, and bloody tears were rolling down his emaciated cheeks. I want to keep the baby, but your mother won't let me, said Juan Carlos. Karina looked into the crib, and she saw that inside there was a plushie of Nana. Karina opened her mouth to speak, but her words came out as gibberish. As a man cannot take care of a baby, he cannot take care of a plushie, he cannot even take care of himself, said Juan Carlos, rocking the cradle with even more feverish energy. It took much willpower, but Karina managed to open her eyes, and she had escaped her nightmare for the time being. And she left the bed, and she petted her bunny Nana nervously, and she looked with envy at Bruno sleeping with his big mouth open. Like while she's having nightmares, he's like... How she envied the fact that he could fall asleep so easily. Karina opened her drawer and she took out a Tylenol to help her fall asleep. And the next day, she had Bruno take her to work. And at the end of her shift, she visited Irina to get a psychic reading. Karina described her most recent dream. When you see a crib in your dream, it represents protection. You might also be pregnant or somebody you know is going to have a baby, explained Irina. The crib also represents your desire to be a mother. What was the color of the crib? What was it made of? I think it was blue and it was made of wood, said Karina, straining her memory. If it is blue, it means someone is going to have a baby boy. And the word crib represents family unity, explained Irina. Dreaming about stuffed animals is common, especially among those who grew up playing with plushies. And when they manifest in your dreams, they represent a longing for simpler times. As a small child, you had all your needs met and you didn't need to worry about the well-being of others. What was the size of the stuffed animal? He was a little bunny plushie, said Karina, bringing out from her purse her little Nana plushie. Anita touched the little plushie, and then she spaced out for a bit, and she blinked twice, and then she said to Karina, "Tiny plushies reminds us of the fragility of life. Also, those who start new relationships tend to dream about white rabbits." "In the dream, he was kinda gray," said Karina, narrowing her eyes. "Then it means that someone is manipulating you," said Irina. "And my father?" asked Karina. "Why has he been haunting my dreams?" "In the dream world, your father is not your father. Rather, he is a manifestation of your of how you assert yourself in your relationship," said Irina. Karina thought of her father's frantic way of rocking the cradle and how it echoed her hysterical way of approaching all of her relationships. So according to Irina, like the father represents just how it's an aspect of Karina's personality. Karina paid Irina for the psychic reader, and then she went to her mother for advice. Karina told her mother her most recent dream, and Ola began to digest the information from a clinical standpoint. "When was the first time you dreamt of your father?" asked Ola. "I think it was the night I met Bruno," said Karina, rubbing her temple. "Both had the same green eyes." "You had dated men with green eyes before, but you never had nightmares," said Ola dryly. "What happened before you met Bruno?" "I was with Kain, and he threw up all over the floor of the bathroom, and I cleaned it up," explained Karina, looking at the floor. "I would do that for your father whenever he didn't make it to the bathroom," said Ola, "and that incident must have reminded you of him. I do not think that you ever truly processed his death, and do you want to talk about your father with me, Karina?" "If you think it will help," said Karina, shrugging her shoulders. The two ranted about Juan Carlos for hours, and when it came time to sleep, the nightmares did not return. The following morning, Karina got a text message from Alexia. He had been invited to an office party at his boss's penthouse, and he wanted Kain to be his +1. Karina tested back, "Why don't you just ask Kain out for a date?" "He has been a bit distant ever since we came back from the camping trip," tested Alexia. "That's funny. Kain tells me that you're the one who's staying away," tested Karina. "And he thinks that you do not want to be his friend because he refuses to sleep with you." "He tells you everything, doesn't he?" tested Alexia before adding a few frowny faces. "We are best friends after all," said Karina. Karina tested Kain and she said, "Alexia needs you to be his +1. He doesn't want to be the only single loser at his office party. Are you willing to help him?" Kain read the message and he called up Eugenia to see if she wanted to hang out. Eugenia said that she was going to be spending time with her little sister. Kain then called his father to see what he was up to. Jack was having a jam session with Arjuna, so he was busy. Kain asked Siddhanta to hang out, but his co-worker said it was date night. Destiny had ordained that Kain was to be Alexia's +1, and the alternative was for Kain to spend the night alone in an empty house. Kain opened his closet and he wore the blue tuxedo that Bruno had gifted him. Alexia drove out to Kain's house to pick him up, and he opened the door for him. Kain rubbed his temple and his face contorted into a grimace. Alexia, feeling sheepish, went back to the driver's seat to allow his friend to sit down without assistance. The two did not speak to one another for an hour, and Alexia arrived to Pentacle, and he parked near his boss's penthouse apartment, and the two left the car and they started to walk towards the skyscraper. I miss being a child, said Kain, sighing. Back then we could just be friends without the pressure of having that friendship evolve into something else. Yes, things were much simpler back then, said Alexia, laughing nervously. I miss the old Alexia, retorted Kain. We were able to hang out without you flirting with me every 5 seconds. The old me was a coward, too afraid to confess his feelings for you, Kain, retorted Alexia. They arrived at the entrance, and Alexia showed his invitation, and they got inside the clear glass elevator. And then Alexia pressed down the number 58. They got a good view of Pentacle on the ride up to the penthouse. If I was a woman, would you still reject me, Kain? Asked Alexia. Yes, I don't like pushy women, said Kain. I only tolerate Karina because she's the only true friend I have left in the entire world. But with other women, as soon as they start barking orders, I run for the hills, or I pretend to listen only to do the complete opposite. That is the quickest way to get them to break up with you. Have you ever been in love? Asked Alexia. The elevator door opened and the sappy conversation came to an end, and all of the guests began to hyper-focus on Alexia and his +1. Alexia shifted to war mode and he began to gossip with all of his co-workers. As for Kain, he began to roam around the penthouse while examining the decoration, and his eyes gravitated towards the balcony pool. A servant passed by with some champagne, and so Kain took the glass in order to relax, and in the balcony he found a chair and a table in the dark, unlit corner. He sat down and he brought out his Game Boy advice from within his coat. And with his headsets on, he was able to immerse himself in the game, and he was struggling to memorize the pattern of the Phoenix Magnia, and just when he had the boss almost beaten, Alexia gingerly took his Game Boy away. You couldn't wait 5 seconds for me to finish, yelled Kain, slamming his palm against the table. Ah, that's too bad. Was that your last life? Giggled Alexia, looking at the game over screen. Stop being a wallflower and come mingle. I don't know anyone here, protested Kain, getting his game back, and he turned it off and then he placed it inside his coat pocket. I miss the old Kain. There was a time when you were the life of the party, said Alexia, pulling Kain by the arm. Kain gradually allowed Alexia to guide him back into the living room, and Alexia's co-workers began to interrogate Kain, and they asked about his job, his sexual preferences, his religion, how much money he made, his education level, and his political affiliation. Kain responded with the mechanical politeness of a politician. He had heard all these questions before, and he had rehearsed vanilla answers to all of these inquiries, and he could no longer tolerate all of those strangers nitpicking his life. When he couldn't tolerate all those strangers nitpicking his life, Kain pulled Alexia by the arm to drag him to the dance floor. If he was dancing, he didn't have to answer any questions. Alright, so then that's, that chapter. So yeah, if people are like nitpicking your life, just go to the dance floor to get away from them.